Hi. Um, so this video has been, excuse me, been a long time coming, really. Much like the video talking about my anxiety and my mental health problems that I had over the years. This one's a bit more difficult. It's taking some time to get around to recording, simply because I find it a bit difficult to get the words out on the screen. But it explains the kind of the purpose behind me doing this 450 plus mile hike throughout England, while camping and carrying my mum's ashes home, which will be from our last family home together to her hometown of Hartlepool. It was our hometown of Hartlepool, so it's where we grew up with her. I think she was actually born in Billingham, which was close by, but I'll be taking her to Hartlepool and scattering her ashes in some places that we spent with her as children. One of which is a park there, seafront. I don't even know what the laws are with scattering ashes, but I'll have to check that out. But the purpose really is for me to, she carried us for most of our lives. So I think it's only fair and fitting really that I do the same for her. I think I've said in previous videos I could have done it on bike, I could have done other ways, but nothing worth doing is ever easy, is it? I know equally there's people that have walked a lot further than I have. However, I've never done anything like this before, and do it in the name of my mum and of mental health. I think it's an admirable thing to do. I hope it's an admirable thing to do, and I hope it shows other people maybe that are going through similar things that there's a better life out there for you if you just put one foot in front of the other. So in 2017 my mum passed away from bowel cancer, and it was a really tough time for her and for us as a family. There's millions, hundreds of millions of people that have been through the same thing over the years, but it was a completely curable form of cancer. We were told that had she been examined on any number of the occasions that she'd asked to be examined, then the probability of her surviving was actually very good. Like, as in, they said, albeit indirectly, that she would have survived had she been examined the first time she'd asked to be examined. So anyway, she fought the disease for almost 2 years, and she passed away on the 17th of April, which was Easter Monday 2017. Now, I'd been to see her on the 2nd of April, which I'll touch on a bit later. We were told at the time that we knew she was dying. She was in hospice and it was palliative care, but the doctor said to us on the 2nd that, in fact it was the Monday after, we'd had a visit with her, I think, and the doctor said, we know she's dying, but we can't put a time frame on it, but she's not going anytime soon. And then it was the following Friday we were told, you got to come in now, you got to come in and see her and say your last goodbyes to her because she's going. So on that Friday she lost consciousness in the company of her 3 sons. The last thing she said to us was, "I'm sorry." She closed her eyes and never woke up again. She didn't go straight away. We sat by her bedside for 11 days and nights, and we were joined by her sister and her brother-in-law, and we watched her waste away with no food and no water until she passed away 11 days later on the 17th of April. So this story really is the motivation behind, this is my mum's story. I should have said really, this is the story of my mum and the motivation behind carrying her ashes home to where she was born and finally lay her to rest, and how better to remember those that we've lost by telling their stories and keeping their memories alive. So some people might ask why after 5 years I'm posting these details online. Why am I deciding to tell the story of my mother? Why am I posting personal information online? Simple answer is this: if I don't, then nobody will, and it never exists, and memory just fades away, as many other millions of people have. People that have been very important to myself and to others around the world. People who've really struggled through their lives, and people who deserve better, but weren't offered the same luxuries that me and you have had. And it means that their struggles, my mum's and other people's, meant nothing. It means that they pass unnoticed, unimportant, underappreciated, just be a blip in existence, as if she never mattered, but she did, more than you can imagine. She was born one of 7 brothers and sisters, raised in the northeast of England. Life from the outset was one of hardship, with violence and other types of assault dished out by a paternal father. Home wasn't a happy one. I will say though, whilst she didn't have a happy upbringing, she never claimed that she was assaulted. Not like that. And I can't say that some of her brothers and sisters were that fortunate, because according to what my mum told us, they weren't that fortunate. So right from the outset, when she was a kid, she had severe dyslexia, and her mum had MS, which I think eventually took her life. She was shipped off to a boarding school as a child, but it wasn't your boarding schools you might imagine it now. With your kind of upper middle classes and your upper classes all running about playing cricket, and it wasn't like that. It was more like a nunnery. It was run by sisters, so it was a bit strict. And it wasn't like it is nowadays. People that maybe have got learning difficulties and things are given a bit more attention and time and dedication. She was put to the back of the class. Dyslexia wasn't as recognised then as it is now. Instead of being treated in the way that she should have been treated and nurtured and loved and cared for, she was just, as I say, pushed to the back of the class, afraid to raise her hand through fears of ridicule, and feeling like she was an idiot and not really being able to get the respect of her peers and the other students. She was an outcast from day one. She didn't really have a belonging. So, she left school and managed to find a job as a seamstress. It sounds a bit like a Cinderella story, but it is what it is. And then, she met my dad, stopped working, and fell pregnant with her first child, my older brother. And the addition of a baby brought some much needed focus for my mum to pour her love and devotion into. And then 3 years later I followed, and 2 years after that my younger brother followed. And she doted on us. She really did. And she took us to school every day, picked us up, fed us, played with us, took us to the swimming pool, took us to the parks. And we were her world. That was kind of always the way, I think. But unfortunately, their relationship broke down and they divorced. I just want to say as well from the outset that even though I'm doing this video about my mum, I want this by no measure of it. It's not a reflection of my dad. My dad's a good dad, and he was always there for us, and provided for us financially and emotionally, and he's a good man. He's a really good granddad, and I love him to pieces. So this is a video about my mum's life. It's not a video about, bashing my dad because he's not a bad guy. I've never really known a hard working person in my life, to be honest. Served his apprenticeship in the dockyards of Govan, Glasgow. Born and bred proud Scotsman. Doting grandfather, loving father. He's a good, honest, hard-working man. You can't really fault him. So that said, their relationship broke down. My mum remarried into the Navy. She decided to move us to the south of England. I think she was going to try and stay in Hartlepool. She'd offered to buy our family home from my dad, but her and her new husband couldn't keep up with the payments, and my dad bought it back. So we moved to the south, to a place called Gosport, into what was known at the time as married quarters. So that was naval housing for families, and we lived there for a number of years. And everything seemed good. We didn't really see our stepdad much. I think he was at HMS Sultan, and he spent a lot of time there. And he actually went away to the Falklands War. I don't think he saw action, but he was on one of the ships there, and obviously, Falklands was pretty bad, and some bad stuff happened there. But when he came back from the Falklands, there was quite clearly something not right with him, up here. So he'd come back, and he wasn't a full shilling, and my mum became a victim of physical or violent and sexual abuse, so horrendous that later on in life that physical abuse would be blamed for the onset of epilepsy and grand mal seizures. And the home that she'd built for her kids was now in tatters. She had to make a choice. She either had to stay there at the behest of violence and her own mental health, or she had to protect her children and leave. And she did the right thing, despite the fact it was going to be really, really difficult for her. So because their relationship had broken down and they were getting divorced, that meant that we no longer had the right to live in the naval housing. So effectively we were homeless. We were going to be made homeless. However, my mum met someone else. I never really asked, or never thought to ask if she met him through love or through necessity. But your mum will do what she needs to do to look after your kids, or her kids. But she had several more failed relationships following that, and then we ended up settling in what was to be our last family home together, in a place called Cops Lane in Gosport. It was a council-owned property, and whilst we didn't own it, it was we saw it as our home, and it was a place for myself, my brothers, and our friends to all hang out. And my mum always provided a shoulder, for us and for our friends as well. A lot of people saw her as a second mum growing up, because she was always there for everyone. Many of the people that grew up with us, some of my friends, my older brother's friends, a lot of my older brother's friends, a lot of my younger brother's friends, all attended her funeral. And I'm talking about, some of them maybe 10 or more years since they last seen her, because that was the kind of relationship that they had with her. And and then when we were all there together at the funeral, despite some of us hadn't seen each other for 20 years, it was kind of like all being in that one big family again. So that kind of give you an idea of what kind of atmosphere it was growing up in that place. It wasn't always perfect, but we were a good bunch of people. I think we all stuck by each other, and my mum was I think the cornerstone for a lot of that. So so we'd moved to that house, and just before we moved there, we lived in another place, and I think it was in her mid to late 30s she started to have seizures, and later be diagnosed with having epilepsy. which would give her grand mal seizures, the big ones. And this in turn caused agoraphobia and claustrophobia. Just turn this round because that glare is doing my head in. So yeah, and, that in turn caused agoraphobia and claustrophobia, depression, anxiety. My mum had gone from a healthy, fun, loving person to a shell of her former self in the space of 2 years. She lost almost all her friends, who were either embarrassed about being around someone with epilepsy, or they just simply didn't understand it. And it was awful for her. She had a lot of friends that she used to knock about with. They used to go out, and then almost overnight they all just disappeared because of what she was going through. When I was in my 20s, more often than not, if my mum had a seizure, I'd be the one to sit with her and wait for it to pass. Put her on her side, check her airways, hold her hand, tell her that I was there, it'd be okay. Even though that sometimes I wasn't entirely sure it was. Sometimes the seizures went on a bit longer, or they seemed a bit more violent than the last one. And it was scary sometimes, but you just got to try and support them. And once she'd finished having the seizure, I'd make her a cup of tea. She'd go off to bed, and she was exhausted. More often than not, she was so exhausted she fell asleep before she'd drink a cup of tea. Following the diagnosis of epilepsy, she basically became unemployable. As much as you can't deny people employment because of medical conditions, it no doubt happened. She had so much experience in so many different fields, from working jobs to put food on the table for us, that there's a number of things that she could have done. And she wasn't going for high-end jobs. She was going for stuff to pay the bills. And as soon as she put on that form that she had epilepsy, she didn't hear back from people. She's just disgusting, really. I lost count of how many jobs that she applied for and either got rejected for and never heard from again. And her spirit was crushed following that. You want to crush someone's spirit, truly and honestly, you want to crush someone's spirit, take away their ability to provide for their children. There's nothing worse in life. Take away someone's ability to provide for their children, and you'll crush their spirit. So yes, she was devastated. She sank into depression, and she just gave up. The only job that she could get after that was volunteering in a church bookshop, and she loved it. She loved it. She loved doing that job. She didn't get paid for it, but she loved being out and being active. In addition to this, when she was younger, I think she was in her 20s. I don't know if she was not long had my older brother, but her mum told her that she tried to abort her with a knitting needle. I don't know what would possess you to tell your child that, even if it is true, even if you did try it and it didn't happen for whatever reason, you failed for whatever reason. I don't know what would possess you to ever tell someone that, especially your own child. I just don't understand it. And despite that, my mum carried on loving her. She never attended a funeral, but that wasn't by choice. It's because she'd had my younger brother, and she had to have a full hysterectomy. Because my brother was born successfully, but he almost killed her on the way out. So, unfortunately, she was too sick to attend the funeral. And do you know what? Right up until the day she died, she regretted not being able to attend the funeral, despite what her mum had told her. And I don't want a story to be one of complete sadness, because it wasn't. There were points in her life in which she was happy. We got lots of photos of her, laughing and joking, and she was one of us when we were growing up. She'd get involved if we had parties and stuff, and a few years we had New Year's Eve parties there, and it was a fun place to grow up in. And despite all of her problems, she had a lot of love to give. and she was fun. She was fun, really fun. Uh, oh, and she loved her animals. She loved her animals as well. So she had everything from cats and dogs, cockatiels, chinchillas as well. She had chinchillas at one point, which is, chinchillas are amazing. Um, Difficult to clean up after, but they're amazing. Um, and she loved her sons, as only a mum could, despite all of our faults. Uh, and she doted on her granddaughter, my daughter. She loved the bones of her. I got lots of happy memories from when I was a kid with her. At the beach at Stokes Bay, picnics in Stanley Park, and we used to run together as well. We used to run together. So there's a place called Broom Lane and Shoot Lane. It was just round the corner from my house, and we used to go jogging at night, and we'd run up Shoot Lane, and then we'd do a circle, come back down Broom Lane, and the two kind of intersected at the bottom. And then when we got back, it was about another 5 minutes to our house from there. And then when we got back, we'd sprint the last 200-300 meters. And she was quick. I was quick, for a kid of my age, but she there was a couple of times she nearly beat me. She was pretty swift. I'm pretty sure sometimes she let me win. And we used to watch Most Haunted together when I was growing up. There was some funny points in that. And I used to go to church with her sometimes, despite my lack of faith. I knew that she needed support. She wanted to go to church. She was always religious. She follows a number of different faiths during her life. But I think I knew that she didn't want to go on her own, so I'd go with her. But when she had enough confidence to go on her own, I stopped going. She met a lot of people. She met some good friends. Like I said, she followed a number of different faiths, and no matter which place, which church she was going to, or what faith it was, if it was Christian or Mormon or Catholic or whatever, she always managed to make friends wherever she went, right until the day she passed. She was always making new friends. She used to dance about the house when she was doing her cleaning. When we were kids, she'd put like Jackson 5 on, or Michael Jackson, or Paula Abdul, Celine Dion, Whitney Houston, all those kinds of people. When she was growing up, she'd be belting out the notes. She couldn't sing for toffee, but she used to love having a bit of a sing when she was cleaning up. She used to have two Yorkshire Terriers called Gizmo and Creedy. I think Creedy's name was actually McCready, and they're both pedigree Yorkshire Terriers that were bought for her. And she walked them every day right up until when they both passed away, and she loved them. And then following that, we decided to get a rescue dog for her birthday. It was a German Spitz, and we called him Barry, of all things. But yeah, and even when she was in the throes of cancer with chronic pain, she still found the time and the energy to play with her granddaughter. She'd been through numerous bouts of chemoradiotherapy, and despite how sick she was, she'd still, you could see it. You could see she was in visible pain. She was dosed up on morphine, but you could see that she still wanted to spend time with her. She was aware that her time was limited. So yeah, as us as boys, as we grow older, we moved out naturally, and the house became quieter and quieter. You could see the change in my mum. Loneliness had set in, and life took over. We had jobs, girlfriends, wives. I moved to another town. My brothers stayed close, and they visited more often than I did. From that point on, she never had more than a couple of friends. One that she would call long-term true friends anyway. She barely ate, and when she did, it was mostly junk. She'd occasionally make herself a salad, but even when she passed away, she had a chest freezer full of food that would never be eaten. I think she just, because of agoraphobia and claustrophobia, she just kind of aimlessly walk around a supermarket and just pick things up, because she was determined to get herself out there and not become a victim of her illnesses. But equally, when she was there, I think she was so consumed by her conditions that she didn't really know what it was she was buying. So one day she woke up, found a lump, and phoned a doctor and asked to be examined, and they didn't examine her. She went back on 3 separate occasions after that and asked to be examined, and they didn't examine her. I think on the fifth occasion, she went back and saw a female doctor and asked to be examined, and she was examined, and the female doctor wouldn't tell her directly, but my mum said, "It's cancer, isn't it?" And the female doctor said, "We need to send you for a biopsy, but it looks like cancer." They did the biopsy, confirmed it was cancer, and then she went through months of invasive chemoradiotherapy, so the double, and then a massive surgery to remove the cancer. But because the chemoradiotherapy was so invasive, it didn't allow the skin to stitch back together. She was given something called a vac pack, which is supposed to help, but it never did. And no one was ever honest about how bad the wound was. It was on her backside. They went in that way and cut right up to her hip. And I can understand from a son's point of view. It's my 2 brothers is not something you want to look at. No one wants to look at their mum's backside, do they? And I think I was the only person that ever did, because no one else would tell her, not even the doctors. Everyone just said to her, "It's not as bad as it feels," or "It's not as bad as you might think it is." And she asked me if I'd look, and I did. And I lied to her, and I told her it's not that bad. And it was horrendous. It was a hole the size of my fist. It looks like she'd been in a horrendous motorbike accident, is how I can describe it. And she carried that wound until the day she died. I can't imagine the pain that she must have been going through on a daily basis to have to put up with that. So we were told anyway, we were told after the surgery that the surgeon had cut right to the bone and removed all the cancer. And we found this out later to be untrue. And so the surgeon had decided not to tell her he couldn't get it all, because he didn't think that she was mentally prepared to take that news, which I personally and professionally, I don't really think that's his bloody call to make. I think you should be honest with your patients. I think it's a massive case of negligence on his part. He didn't think he should be able to digest that information. So she had a follow-up appointment with a consultant and with the surgeon um, after this, and we were expecting to go there and get the all clear. That's what we were told. We were told at the beginning of a treatment that 95% of people go on to have a normal life expectancy, or at least 5 years, I think they said, after that. She was 59 at the time. She's no age to die. And instead, we went into the first meeting, and the consultant said, no matter what happens, we can always try new things. He said there's a new experimental surgery, or experimental treatment, which would be really good for you. He said, we'll wait to see what the results of your surgeon says. So, we're kind of going in there thinking, well, if it is, worst case scenario, at least we can try something else. And then we went upstairs and had the next meeting with the surgeon. And the surgeon, literally within 10 seconds of being in there, said, it's terminal, we couldn't get it all, it's palliative care. And my mum stood up and walked out. She said, fuck this, I'm going for a cigarette. And I don't blame her. And I sat there and then the surgeon said to me, are you taking all the information in? And I said, yeah. And inside I wanted to smack him. I wanted to knock his teeth out. And I wanted to say to him, I never did, and I always regret this, but I wanted to say to him, why didn't you tell her at the time? Why have you dragged her on and built her hopes up? So he's said at the time he didn't think that she'd be mentally prepared to take that kind of information, but instead he's led her to believe that actually they might have removed all the cancer and that she might get better. What do you think is more devastating? Half-wit. Anyway, it went to court in the end, and a consultant cancer specialist testified that had she been examined when they'd requested, then she would have survived, in so many words. But unfortunately our solicitor focused on one ridiculous point, which I've no idea why they focused on. And we were told to settle out of court for £6,000, and it was never about the money. We were probably a bit naive, thinking we were going to get our day in court and get to, really throw it at the GPs for not examining her. But that was never going to happen. But I say it was never about the money. But it just brings into perspective how broken the legal system is in the UK, because I got more money for getting knocked off my bike by a road sweeper than I did for my mum dying. But I don't care about the money. I care about people being held accountable for their mistakes and for their disregard for other people's lives. If you just did your job properly, it could have been avoided. Your job that you get paid for, that you trained for 10 years, and just because you couldn't be asked to examine someone, they died. That's what my problems are with. So she stayed at home as much as she could following this. We were fortunate enough to spend one last Christmas together. But this, of course, came with its own problems. Would you buy someone for Christmas, or would you get someone for Christmas that isn't going to be there the next year? You don't buy them a TV or anything like that, are you? So it was a bit of a difficult one. So me and my brothers decided to make something for her instead. I've got to be honest, I can't remember what my older brother did. I think my younger brother made a photo album, and I wrote her a story. in the theme of a fairy tale. Her name was Linda, so I called it Linderella, which I know sounds ridiculous, but it was basically the story of her life, but told as if it was a fairy tale, and it just explained that despite the fact that she would pass and go back to the stars or whatever, that part of her would live on in her grandchildren, because at the time my ex-partner was pregnant with my son, or what would be my son. So I wrote that into the book as well. So one of the last memories that I've got of my mum was going to visit her in the hospice, and it was a Sunday, and it was like a Disney film, and the sun was out. It was beautiful. There was wildlife. There was squirrels around. There was a pheasant, I think. Was it a pheasant? And there's bees about, and it was amazing. And we sat there and we drank tea all day and we talked, and it was like nothing was wrong. We were laughing, joking. We were talking a lot about our lives together, and growing up, and our family homes, and stuff like that. And it was amazing. Like I say, it was like she wasn't sick. It was like she wasn't dying. It was like, just for that one moment in time, just me and my mum were just kind of together, just being together, just spending that time, that kind of one beautiful moment together. We were just existing in that space. And that one perfect day. And that was a Sunday. And the Monday, we had the meeting with the hospice doctor, who said she was dying, but she wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, on the Monday. And then the Friday, we were told to come in and see her, and say our goodbyes. And then she passed 11 days later. So I think the time from being told she was terminal was October 2016, and they said she had about 6 months, and she did, almost to the day, I think. In fact, I think her last appointment I went with her was October 17th, so bloody hell, it would have been 6 months to the day, I think. So we went back to the family home when she passed, and I thought that, when us three boys had moved out, that the house was a shell then, but it wasn't. It was a shell when she was gone. All the life, all the love and the laughter had drained out of the walls when she passed away. And it just wasn't the home that we recognised anymore. It was just full of sadness. I think every ounce of light and happiness left that house when she left us. Now, I've always been a firm believer that you don't have to be a product of your upbringing, and my mum wasn't, to a point. She raised three grounded, well-mannered and polite boys into men. Despite continued rejection, she still put herself out there and made friends and offered her love unconditionally, even to those that may have wronged her. She wasn't a saint by any measure of it, but she also wasn't wholly bad either. I think sometimes life beats you down so hard that it becomes impossible to drag yourself out of that hole without the help of others. But in the end, life didn't just beat my mum. It kept beating her into submission until she had no fight left in her. And she told me this herself, and I wish I would have listened. I'm not going to do what I usually do in these videos. I'm not going to ask you to like or subscribe or any of that other nonsense for this. I'm not interested in any of that for this. I want to tell you a story of a person that I knew, a person that I loved, a person that struggled for almost all of their life, only to die before her time. She died without a dignity. She died with one true friend. She died needlessly. She died without the kind of love that can only come from sharing your heart with another person. And she tried to hold on as much as she could, but she died 6 weeks before my son was born. Her first and possibly only grandson. She would have loved the bones of him. So instead of liking or subscribing, I'd ask this one thing of you. Take the time instead to pick your phone up and text or call a family member or a friend, even if you haven't spoken to them in some time, and tell them how much you value them. Call your mum or call your dad and tell them that you love them for everything they have ever done for you. Even if you spoke to them an hour ago, just pick the phone up and tell them you care. My mum had a needlessly tough life. And despite all of her hardships, she never ran out of love to give to people. That's the story of my mum and the reason why I'm doing this. She dedicated her life to raising me and my brothers. She never went abroad. She never had any money to speak of. She worked 3 jobs at points to put food on the table and pay bills. But most importantly, she loved us unconditionally. And now it's time for me to take her home. Thanks for watching. You can let her go now.
Here you go.
Hey, Kira!
It's a bit of muck there, she can see. I've got to try and get on with it myself.